Hey everyone, Mrhappy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mrhappy, aka Mrhappy Mondays, a weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. Man, with all the Alexander Ultimate the past couple weeks, we've been pretty dry on content, but I got some good news. My Ranged Versus is almost done. I'm going to be getting to work on that after I'm done recording this right here. And Aloha just came into the room and is licking his bowl. I'm going to leave that in there, even though he didn't actually make any sound. But all the same, the Versus series is going to be a priority for the next couple weeks, even through the holiday season. It usually takes about 2 or 3 days of video when it comes to that, so please be a little bit patient. We'll try to do any news-related stuff in between. But now that I've got at least a few more free hours from Ultimate, I should be able to commit to doing our usual video content creation. I also am going to be making a few posts on the Patreon. As some of you may have heard, in the recent State of the Realm, I ran into a bit of a snafu with Patreon that I didn't realize had been happening for the past couple of years, and I'm going to be posting something clearing all of that up over there for the people who have been supporting the channel. On top of that, I'm also going to be uploading a behind-the-scenes video over on Patreon for the Ranged Versus, maybe even 2 for the editing process itself. I did the recording process with some commentary, and I may do the editing process with some commentary as well. If that does well over there, I may actually bring it onto YouTube, but I'm just keeping you guys in the loop of what's going on with me behind the scenes. Now, of course, we do have to thank our patrons for supporting the channel, as we do always. Their names have been rotating, or I guess going in a list in the corner of the video. And we have our patrons of Darkness, Khuja, Jenova, and Kurenai Oni, who have been massive supporters throughout the recent months and years. So thank you to all of you for supporting a channel that, quite frankly, doesn't deserve the support that you give it. But anyway, I don't think I have too many questions this week, because this Mondays is actually from 2 weeks ago, and I see like 60-ish comments, so we'll see how many questions there actually are. This may be a shorter Mondays video. Let's check it out. All right, first question. Looks like it's a short one. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hey, Haps, how are you? What are your thoughts of Final Fantasy XIV R2? What? That's not anything that exists. It sounds like what you meant to ask was Final Fantasy XI R2, which a lot of people took note in Nexon's recent report that the Final Fantasy XI mobile game, which was supposed to be Final Fantasy XI Remake or Remaster or whatever they were going to call it, it was originally designated Final Fantasy XI R, and it has been changed to the designation R2. Now, I did do some looking into that to see if that actually meant anything, and from what I understand, the small 2's designation is something they give to mobile games, meaning it's no different than the original Final Fantasy XI R, which is probably never going to come out at this rate. If it ever does, you'll see content for it on the channel. You know, anytime a new Final Fantasy mobile game comes out, we like to at least take a peek at it, if anything at all. But yeah, I'm assuming you meant Final Fantasy XI R2, and the 2 doesn't really mean anything as far as I've been able to determine. Here we've got a really basic one. I'm seeing a lot of just comments in general on this Mondays with Mrhappy, so I'm actually going to take this one even though it's not listed as a hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Hey Mrhappy, are you going to play Death Stranding? I don't have an interest in it. I think that I'm interested in the story, and I want to know what's happening. I think even people who played it kind of wanted to know that by the end of it. But I'm not interested in the gameplay, like, at all. Like, not even a little bit. And I'm not even 100% convinced on the story, but I haven't seen it, so I'm not going to judge it based on what I haven't seen, but I have no interest in playing it. I don't want to play. It just doesn't look fun to me. It's just me. I don't think it looks fun. I don't think it looks good. I just want to see the story. Next question, hashtag Mrhappy Mondays, hashtag quick question. There's a lot of, I know, it's not that long. You'll be all right here. Hey, Habs, hope you're having a great weekend. It's been all right. I'm not done with Alexander. Until I'm done with Alexander, every day's terrible. So don't assume a day is good until you see me post an Alexander clear video. Then you know it's been a good day. Anyway, I just got my summoner to 80, and during the whole leveling, I had one question. Why does physics suck so much? 1% heal spell is ridiculous. Description says it's 400 potency, but it feels like 40 at best. Do you know why it is so weak and why it even exists on summoner? Anyway, thanks for your time and keep up the good job. What you are experiencing is a side effect of summoner being derived from Arcanist. Now, because Arcanist becomes Scholar and Summoner, I guess they saw fit to give it Physic as a base class ability, as opposed to making it the first level 30 ability that Scholar gets when they receive it. Physic specifically scales off of your Mind stat, which Summoner has none of. So because of that, it sucks. That's the bottom line. It's just a remnant of that whole one class becoming 2 job system, which they've openly said they think has kind of been a problem, and they probably won't do it ever again. You're experiencing one of the reasons. Now, for a follow-up answer, because I feel like I would get the follow-up question, but Vercure doesn't suck. That's because it's for a job that only needs one stat in the form of intelligence. So Vercure is actually based on your intelligence on Red Mage because it doesn't have to split a class between 2 jobs. So it's not trying to base one spell off of 2 potential different scalings, which was the main problem that Physic had. Now the other 2 solutions is Physic could just be a Scholar-only ability, and then you wouldn't have to think about it on Summoner, or they'd have to make it scale with intelligence, and then Summoner would just have a heal button that, let's be honest, if it ever comes down to it, you've probably gone too far, and it's probably not going to be a good situation anyway. That's the best answer I could come up with, and some of that's conjecture, but hopefully it was a valuable double answer for a single question. Next one, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. I can hear Aloha yowling for attention in the other room. Hello, Happy, longtime fan, second time asking. So I have a bonus of 99 Ukab totems that you can trade in for a Bahamut mount when it comes around in 69 years. Nice. 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 As someone who has cleared the Eden Savage raids as my very first raid tier throughout my entirety of playing 14, I'm now looking to go and give Ultimate a shot for the Glamour weapons, particularly Ukab. I know the Epic of Alexander is out now and people are trying it out, but as a samurai man, I just find the Ukab Katana to be too good to ignore. I second that. I re-beat Ukab before going into the Epic of Alexander, and now I'm leveling my samurai. That was the thing I grabbed with the totem that I got from Ukab, because it looks way better than the half-broken Uwu Katana. I've not cleared 04 Savage yet, though, and I know that's my first goal to unlock Ukab. Yeah, I always forget that. I'm not going to lie, I always forget that that's a condition. Like, E4 Savage is a condition for Epic of Alexander. My question is, do you know of any place that I can look in order to find people who are willing to help me clear 04 Savage, and hopefully even help me in giving Ukab a shot? I know it's old content, people usually don't like doing old content, also Reddit is a mess and it's so huge that it's daunting to look for people there. Many thanks to me for ever walking the Papega Glamour of the Void. Cheers. Well, you've actually kind of read through what my recommendation would have been, and that is, in all honesty, would have been to use the Reddit recruitment thread. I know that it can be daunting, and I know you're not always going to find what you're looking for, and it looks like my cat is looking for me in the form of somebody to give him attention and or feed him an extra time before his actual feeding time, which is not for another 3 hours. Isn't that right, Aloha? Isn't that right? He wants head scritches. That's what he wants the most right now. But yeah, I mean, this is always tough. Finding people to do old content is pretty tough. I find that your best bet personally is actually to look for an Epic of Alexander or a future Ultimate Static. And usually a form of preparation for those, especially if they're going in fresh for a first, like, you know, everyone's going in, they haven't done Ultimate before, they don't have experience with it before, the first step is to go back and do the old Ultimates. So finding a static that is interested in Savage and Ultimate, but may not necessarily be like, you know, a hyper experienced group, that is probably your best bet. If not, you just maybe have to have a group of friends that have done it and want to do it again. Luckily, people who do Ultimate tend to like redoing the old Ultimates because it's still a challenging piece of content, even if the DPS checks due to job changes are kind of just Ultimate Papega. That being said, I can't think of a better bet than that. And unfortunately, it's coming from the perspective of someone who has beaten the first 2 Ultimates and is still working on the 3rd one. So I don't know that that's even like an accurate view or a fair view at all. You know, it may just be me and my little shell thinking, oh yeah, he could just do that, it'll be fine. But I don't unfortunately have a better answer than that. So that's gonna have to do, I guess. Sorry. Alright, so I noticed the video was a little bit choppy in that last question. I'm not going to re-record all of that, because otherwise I'd be like rehashing the same exact thing that I just said, and I kind of just rushed through it half-assed. So I just restarted the video camera. Hopefully the rest of the video it looks okay. But anyway, next question, hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy, hashtag one question. Hey Haps, quick warrior question here. Instead of making overpower AoE, should Mithril, Tempest, and overpower switch places? I don't see any purpose in that. That doesn't in any way address the annoyance that overpower is not AoE. Honestly, all the conal AoEs are just kind of, nobody likes them. Like, we put up with them, but everyone much prefers our AoE equivalents that we've had in the past. I know every bard I've ever asked says, can I replace Quick Knock with Wide Volley? Every machinist says, can I replace Spread Shot with Granado Shot? Every warrior wants overpower to be AoE. Everybody wants the first part of the samurai AoE to be AoE, because the second parts are AoE, but the first part's a cone. It's just a weird choice to make conal AoE, and then to make Rockbreaker not conal because your other 2 aren't conal. But yet you have warrior who has 1 conal, 1 non-conal, and then a bunch of non-conal. No. Just make them both AoE, alright? It'll probably overhaul stuff like this actually going into either future patches or the next expansion. Next question, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. First time asking a question, so have a free cup of tea on me. I get it, Epic of Alexander. Question, how you doing? I'm doing alright. You doing alright? I'm doing alright. I'll be doing alright when I finish Epic of Alexander. Speaking of which, question number 2, how you enjoying that tea? The fight's actually been a lot of fun. I've been rather frustrated with my own personal progression when it comes to the encounter. Quite a few hours spent in without what I feel like is adequate. I guess it's not as many hours as a lot of other people because there's been a lot of scheduling conflicts and only being able to do certain times of day starting after Sunday, and then we lost a bunch of hours during our long prog week. I'd say I've done 52 hours total since it came out, and it came out 13 days ago as of the time you guys see this. So for me, that's nothing. That is a super, super low effort raid tier, and I was intending to go into the raid tier with 14, 16-hour days, get it done as quickly as humanly possible, and yet I still haven't finished it. In fact, I'm looking for like extra groups that are doing daytime raids or weekend raids or anything. I can do the whole fight. I just need to like get that finishing blow in. Just put me in, coach. Just put me in. If you've been joining me on stream, you know I've been super frustrated because I'm like, I just need the fight to be dead. That's all I need. I can do the whole fight. It's easy for me because I've done it a million times now. I just want it done. Dude, my final kill video is probably going to be like along the lines of, oh, it's over, thank God. Not even like a, yeah. I'm going to be like, oh, it's fucking over. Took so long. Baby rage. Expect that to be what a kill video looks like. All right, next question. Hey, Happy, how you doing? I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. Any reason why you think they stopped giving EX Primal weapons glowing effects? There was none in Stormblade. It seems the pattern continuing in Shadowbringers. I thought they just added glowing effects to the crafted version. Are you asking why there's no like crafted glamour versions? You know, I think they're running into a problem that they're probably trying to hire for because they're probably noticing it. And that as they've increased the amount of jobs expansion by expansion, staying on top of the amount of models they need to create, it seems like they're getting behind on that because even with the Alexander weapons, it definitely feels not like they put less effort into the weapons they chose, but in regards to choosing the weapons that the Alexander weapons were based off of, that feels like it wasn't done as a labor of love. You know, they took the first step of the item level 210 step of the anima weapon for the jobs that had anima weapons, and for the other jobs they took like one from Mount Golg and like Shire weapons and a Leviathan weapon. It was like really weird models to remake, as opposed to either making new ones like they did for Uwu, for like Samurai, or to just use, I don't know, something more interesting. So I don't know. They haven't stated anything like that, but I can't help but it's just weird to me that they've decided to do that. So I have a feeling that might be the reason why you're seeing that as well. But the only other solution would be that they plan to add them as crafted versions later, and I'm not that optimistic about that, to be honest. Here's another real quick one. Yo, Mr. Happy, just got a quick question. I was wondering, since Estinian is still around, do you think we might see one of Midgardsormr's kids in the expansion? I think that is completely irrelevant to Estinian's existence, because his whole story with the dragons, I mean, the story of the dragons isn't done, but it doesn't matter. You know, like he's not trying to bog his life down with anything else involving them. His war is done. Nidhogg's eyes are destroyed. And now he gets along with Race Velger, the other dragons. He's got the new Dragoon armor. He's abandoned that, as a matter of fact, and now he's just in scrubs as he jumps around and is super overpowered. This expansion is all about the first. I mean, there's no doubt we'll go back to the source at some point and deal with stuff that is more prevalent there. This entire expansion is about the first. I don't think Vertra or Azdaja, the only two remaining children who we haven't met who are alive, by the way, I don't think they're going to play any sort of relevant role until at least 6.0, if even then. Next one, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. You know, as I'm answering this, I remember I used to have green screened backgrounds like Dwayne and like random other things. Dude, there's a picture of me over here. I look miserable. I must have been dead. I don't look great right now. I'm getting all this trimmed down so it's more presentable. I get a little haircut this week, but other than that, man, I'm just like the thumbnail for that video. Hashtag Mr. Every Monday. So if you could give any Java, hello to you too, by the way, any Java machinist level rework, what would it be and why? And if that's too hard, what deserves a ninja level rework? I would give Red Mage probably a ninja level rework. I think Red Mage is, I don't know, maybe the problem is like a job needing a rework versus a job not being fun to me are not the same thing. Ninja needed a rework because it was bogged down and clunky. It was oversaturated and didn't really mesh well with its own abilities. Not to mention what its most valuable assets were just, it kind of overshadowed the job itself, which isn't really a problem anymore. Trick Attack is still the most major component of the job in regards to its party synergy, but the actual playing of the job is so much more important now than just being a trick bot, and that is, for me, a very successful rework. Samurai got a very small rework as well that's been largely successful. People are even bringing it into Ultimate with no prejudice whatsoever, which should be a very big tell for a lot of people. I've seen a lot of Samurais, a lot of dancers. Everything other than like Red Mage and Black Mage have been very well represented in Ultimate from what I can see. As of the time of this recording, I'm aware of 3 Red Mage clears and only 2 Black Mage clears, but obviously one of those Black Mage clears was the world first group, so it says a lot about what's possible when it comes to that, and really every encounter in the game. But what deserves a machinist level rework? And I got a cough, excuse me. Let's see. I don't think anything else needs something, and I even think machinist needs buffs still anyway. I don't know, maybe either Dark Knight or Warrior still? Like, maybe, because, like, Dark Knight people are calling Warrior light, but I actually thought Warrior was more boring than Dark Knight when I leveled them this expansion, so I don't know, that's tough. I'm gonna just say for a ninja level rework, I think Red Mage could use a touch-up to make it a little bit more, just more interesting, I suppose. I'd like to see stuff like new traits for like stuff like triple cast, or give them chain spells so they can cast freely for like 10 seconds without having to worry, kind of like light speed. Just some cool stuff like that that's both thematic and actually addresses some of their more core issues. Also, the res tax. It doesn't need to exist anymore. Summoner is proof of that. Just buff them. Alright, after a much-needed coughing fit and a little bit of coffee, which I feel like I should sip on to whet my palate as I finish this video, hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hashtag one question. I don't know if the S and the N are supposed to be like a subliminal message, but I'm going to assume they are, and that you're putting evil deeds into my head. Hey, Haps, you doing okay? I hope so. I feel like you're definitely trying to lure me into something right now. No. Haven't seen this asked in all the years of watching Mr. Happy's Mr. Channel. It'd be weird if that was the name of the channel. So here it goes. What is your favorite skill or spell icon in all your years of Final Fantasy XIV? Man, you're asking me to remember a lot of them. And there are actually a lot of really good ones. And I almost feel like I have to exclude Blue Mage ones, because Blue Mage has some great icons. Oh man, I don't know. I always actually really liked Blood for Blood, but not for the reason most people probably think. When I look at Blood for Blood, for really no reason, it reminds me of the Crush Card virus from Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is obviously a fond memory that I have growing up. I played Yu-Gi-Oh! Semi-locally competitively, and also, watched the anime when I was super young. So it just reminds me of it kind of takes me back. It's not the same reason. It's not like super cool like a lot of the other ones are, like a Jirs Kogel icon, or goodness, the Saber Dance icon's pretty cool. Dragoon has a lot of really good icons, actually, like dragons, like the Dragon Sight and whatnot. So yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna go with that. I'm gonna go with Blood for Blood / what is I think it's called Lance Charge now, since they changed it away from what it did before. Just because of that memory, it just reminds me of the Crush Card virus. Really weird answer, but I'm gonna go with it. Next one, hashtag Mrhappy Mondays, no capital S. Hello, Happy, how you doing? I hope you're having a nice week. It'll be nice when I win. Have been watching, I don't know why I couldn't get that word out, since I started playing in Stormblood, First Time Massacre. Welcome. My question is centered around helping people around me to play more / play better. Sometimes I feel some people get discouraged from playing because of the sheer amount of stuff to do in the game. Obviously, having this much content is important for the people who already have much of the old content already done, or at least can like one thing or another about all the content. So if someone is getting done with Shadowbringers 5.1 main scenario today, what should be the things that those people try to do daily and weekly? What content do you think is best for those people to focus on and do at all? Thanks for your time, and be praying for your ultimate. Thank you. So that's a really loaded question, because I'm trying to tell people what they should like without knowing if they'll like it. So I'll say take anything I say here with a grain of salt, because I'm not going to tell you have to do anything. The obvious answers are, level alternate jobs, level your crafters and gatherers, which just got a million times easier, both with Ishgard and the various other changes to experience points gained from various contents for crafting and gathering. But then there's really basic stuff like maybe go and do the side story quests. Are you interested in learning more about the world? Things like sightseeing logs, triple triad cards, and side quests are great for picking up on little lore tidbits. If you just want to advance your character to a higher item level, grab some crafted gear immediately. If you have some tomestones of Gosha, you can upgrade those 450 crafted pieces to 460 and get a nice little item level bump. And then maybe you want to start trying to get into some EX primals. Your best bet, probably the most recent one, Hades. And then maybe you can go back and do the old ones. Then do you want to mount farm? Do you like collecting mounts? Do you like collecting minions? Well, then not to mention the Beast Tribe quests, but also you have things like treasure maps, which have glamour and gil to earn. You've got doing some of the older content if you want to take a look at some of the storylines, or you want to check out some of the fights, or if you want to do Wondrous Tales. Like I said, I'm basically just saying the exact same thing you just said, where there's so much to do that, like, what should people do? And that's not an easy answer. I'd say if I had to give myself 2 or 3 hours a day to play, and I didn't want to raid or anything, I'd probably just do my Beast Tribe dailies for whatever Beast Tribes I wanted the rewards from, or Beast Tribes I was using to level. Then I would probably just do my roulettes to either level or get tombstone caps. And then I would hunt, because hunting is a nice, easy way to get things done. Then on some days you filter in 24-mans or attempting to do EX primals or savage. I just do everything. I'm like the worst person to answer this question, because I try to do everything, and the only thing I really don't do is crafting and gathering. Like, I can and I have, but I wouldn't say I'm that kind of player. So that's like a whole thing I can't even like help to recommend to you, which becomes a, kind of not great. It's not really useful advice, you know what I mean? So I just don't have anything better to say than that. There's nothing to focus on. You just have to pick the thing you're most interested in and focus on that, instead of trying to find a focus amongst everything, because then you're just going to run into the problem that I'm having even answering this question. So pick one of those topics and then just focus on the linear path from start to finish of, if you want to raid, get more gear, get into pickup groups, maybe join a static, beat the fights, move on to the next thing. Because if not, you're going to be like me, and you're going to try to do everything, and it's going to be overwhelming to someone who just hasn't done all that content in the past. Next one, hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hopefully your ultimate prog goes well. Hello to you too, by the way. As a recent returner for 5.1, after a couple of weeks after Eden, I've fallen in love with the ninja rework, but I've been wondering, how does skill speed work with it now? As I recall, in 2.4, TP burns with way too much skill speed. So skill speed has not necessarily been a problem for ninja because of TP burning. It was, don't get me wrong, everyone had that issue with skill speed, especially throughout Heavensward in particular. But in 4.x, the big thing, ever since 4.x, and even going into 5.x now with the complete removal of TP, that hasn't really been much of a concern for almost anybody. The big thing with skill speed on ninjas, it just never played nice with any of its abilities. Back when mudras were in between the global cooldown, what would essentially happen is it would just make it so you were more likely to clip your global cooldown trying to do ninjutsus in between. So it delayed your combos, and it just became a kind of a worthless stat when you could just be critting or direct hitting more on those ninjutsu hits and not screwing yourself over. Now, the big thing now, and I'm actually logged into the game right now, so let me check something before I answer this regarding skill speed now, is that Tenchi and Jin are still not weapon skills. They are abilities that happen to share the global cooldown. Now, let me use them and make sure that doesn't change. So the big thing is they still do not benefit from skill speed. So every single time you use ninjutsu, now it's on the global cooldown and still not benefiting from skill speed. And it's something you do very, very often. So pretty much, I think there is actually an exact skill speed number I remember ninjas kind of throwing around, but from what I understand, you still essentially avoid ninjutsu, like you definitely don't avoid ninjutsu. You avoid skill speed because of ninjutsu. I got it done. I'm so proud of me. So yeah, you pretty much still ignore it. All right, next question. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hashtag one question. Hey, Habs, how you doing? I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. What do you think of the current hunt situation? More specifically, the cross-world hunt trains. I've been unfortunately having problems with the game actually loading the hunt marks onto my screen when there are tons of people in the zone. Xander, PS4 player here. Yeah, that's always going to be a yikes. I mean, don't get me wrong. The game is played fine on a PS4, but when it comes to those hunt load times, it's brutal, your situation. And I'm not the only one who seems to be having this problem. The trains also move so quickly that sometimes by the time I load into the zone itself, the hunt is nearly, if not already dead. So I'd like to point out this was an issue even before cross-world hunts. The issue's just been prolonged because now people are communicating across entire data centers so that people who want to participate in as many hunts as possible have the option to. As an additional update, the same problem now seems to be affecting the new Ishgard restoration, and many people locked out of the Fate thing with their own server due to people coming from other worlds to get EXP or whatever. So I feel like in a lot of ways it's a necessary evil that is okay to have, as long as it isn't something that is perpetual. Now in regards to the Ishgard restoration, they've been very clear that they felt that servers may not be able to complete the steps on their own. It might be easy this first step around. It may not be as easy the second or third time around. Even though I have a feeling it is mostly just going to come down to feeding items into Ishgard and then doing those fates, and that everything else around it is probably going to be more involved, but not directly involved with that more casual aspect of the Ishgard restoration. As for the hunts, I'm someone who participates in cross-world hunts, and this is one of those unfortunate situations where the content is not designed around the lower end hardware that the game supports. And then unfortunately, you're the example in this case with a standard PlayStation 4 without an SSD, not a PS4 Pro, anything that would improve the situation in the slightest. And it would be the same problem probably for somebody running on a really low end PC. Which, would probably be a ballpark, same, if not a little bit more expensive. And that's just a problem that the game has always had with low-end machines. The game has never handled low-end machines, never supported low-end machines very well. And that, unfortunately, includes consoles. As much as things have gotten better and better and better, that one aspect has not. So I personally, as a PC player, love the fact that I can go from a Sargatanas hunt train to a Gilgamesh hunt train to a Fairy hunt train to going to this S rank here to going to that S rank here. I love bouncing around, helping other servers spawn bosses or, just participate in them or whatever, and get to see people that I don't see very often because I don't travel across servers for much things other than hunts. It's nice. But for someone in your exact situation, it's pretty terrible, and I don't see any way of fixing it because they can't make the hardware run it better. They can maybe make changes to display limits to optimize it more, but then you might not even be able to load in the enemy by the time you see it, so that is a whole problem on its own. So unfortunately, it's hard from my perspective to relate to you here, because I'm a fan of specifically the hunt situation. I don't have any issues loading in. And in regards to Ishgard, by the time that was all settled, servers were either already done or are now all already done. And they had like a fix that they were able to put in place for it, and will probably use again in the future now that they've seen what happened the first time around. So I don't think anything I just said was an answer, but at least it gave you some perspective on how I think about things. Next one, hashtag Mrhappy Mondays, hashtag 2 questions. Hey, I appreciate the honesty. Hello, Haps. Hopefully your prog with the Epic of Alexander is going well. Oh, it's going. Question 1, if the dev team is more than likely releasing 2 Ultimates in expansion, how come they don't release it during the 0.3 and 0.5 patches to not only get new players time to get used to the game, but also for players who don't have the early time in the expansion to do Savage? That's a pretty easy answer. So, especially riding off a new expansion hype, this thing that's been, you've spent time and money marketing it and getting as many eyes on it as possible. You want that first update to have something that really impresses people, and Ultimate is definitely a big thing. A lot of people who look at MMOs, they do look at an endgame scene, they do look at the encounter design, they do look at they look at things that are going to generate excitement. And a high-end world race with one of the most difficult raids in the game is something that is going to help market people to continue playing your game, even people who don't necessarily plan on doing the content, just because they're invested in it emotionally and mentally. And they just support it, and they support the game, and they support that kind of content being made. So that's a big reason. Now, as for a follow-up to that, Whether or not they should do it in a 0.3 or 0.5 patch, I think that's kind of a tougher question to answer. So if they do it in a 0.3 patch, it obviously comes with the downfall of the 0.5 patch, the patch that's supposed to be holding your player base until the next expansion. It either needs to have something like the Baldesion Arsenal to hold it over, or needs something else that's keeping people or drawing people in as they prepare for the next expansion launch. Assuming, again, always they never do a 0.6, and the expansion launch always comes following a 0.5 series. The downside to doing a 0.5 one comes with the way they handle end of expansion item level unlocks. The big thing being the finished relic equivalent of that expansion. That will always be the best weapon available in the game. And one of the added advantages, as much as we consider Epic of Alexander and a 0.3 ultimate weapon to be glamour, it is for all intents and purposes the best weapon you can obtain until the next raid tier comes out. And that adds at least some value to the item and the in-between patches. If they do that in a 0.5, they'd probably have to take additional steps to make it stronger than the fully upgraded anima or relic or whatever it is they're going to call it in this expansion. So that may be another reason. They also may just choose to experiment with different types of content in 0.5 like they did with the Baldesion Arsenal, more so than dedicate a ton of resources into massive encounter design, something that is definitely going to take a lot of time to work on, when they could be working on the next expansion's encounter design instead of that. Again, a lot of that's conjecture. None of that has been truly said or supported. Well, that last statement they actually have alluded to and mentioned directly, and not even alluded to, they've straight up mentioned that. But a lot of what I said before that is mostly conjecture and how I would interpret it personally as someone who plays the game and has played it for many years. Question number 2, do you think the dev team will and should make an ultimate fight where you only fight one boss, possibly an ultimate exclusive only boss, but they have multiple forms? Ultimate has very clearly from the beginning always been about recycling old content and making it something more difficult. I have this discussion a lot when people ask me, what would you think of this kind of ultimate fight? What would you think of that kind of ultimate fight? What about these bosses? What about this boss? And I always like to say Ultimate has a very specific development goal in mind, and they've yet to break from any of the conventions that define it thus far, so we need to continue to assume they will follow those conventions going forward. It's not that they're set, it's not that they can never break from the things that they've set in motion, but we have to consider the following things. One, from the beginning they told us Ultimate is about reusing old assets. It's a big time saver when it comes to actually developing such a difficult encounter. That includes the bosses themselves, their abilities, and all of the animations that come with those abilities. They are willing to make some assets, they've shown that, especially with the Epic of Alexander, but they are mostly focused on reusing things in order to save time, and so they can focus on the actual fight development as opposed to making all new assets for that stuff. 2, it needs to be retelling a story, and that is probably the biggest thing that I think goes over people's head. The Wandering Minstrel, or even the Minstreling Wanderer, are not just saying, oh, I heard of these bosses, let me do something crazy with them encounter-wise. He's trying to emphasize the plot lines that we experience with these characters and do a dramatic overtelling. That's how we've always accessed any extreme savages or ultimates through him, is through his dramatic retellings of our heroic tales. So for that reason, he's not just going to throw together a mishmash of bosses or encounters, or even create entirely new ones for us, outside of maybe over-dramatizing a phase and giving us stuff like Perfect Alexander. That is still something that was incredibly awesome and was brand new to the fight, and I loved it. So to answer the question, no, not only do I not think they will ever do an ultimate exclusive boss, but I don't think they'll ever only make us fight one boss, because with a story, it's hard to make us only fight a single boss. Now, the only time I feel we may see that is a bit like cheating is Omega. Eventually, we're going to get to Omega Ultimate, and Omega has a very distinct thing in regards to his raid tier. He is 3 bosses in his own raid tier. He's got Omega, he's got Omega MNF, and he's got God Omega, or Omega God, whatever people want to call that final form. So he could be his own Ultimate. He's the only one who it makes sense for. And even then, it's still taking multiple bosses from multiple different encounters and mishmashing them together, and then they'd probably do something grander than that with him, because he's Omega. You know, he can do whatever he wants. He shapeshift and turn into whatever. He can just go nuts. You know, they'll just go nuts with that one. So that's the closest I think you'll ever get. But for just one boss, like an Odin, no, I don't think they'll ever do that. All right, on that one, next question. Hashtag Mr. Every Mondays. How goes it, Haps? Yeah, hopefully you're going forward and back as you rise up to challenge the T. Dude, I know the whole fight. I can do the whole fight. Just get me in. Just put me in, coach. All right, I need a sip of coffee because I feel like I'm going to go into a coughing fit again. Oh, yeah, I needed that. Hello, by the way. Recently tested out changing around my gear from just picking items for item level to focusing on secondary stats like crit and direct hit. To my surprise, going from crit 2400, 2900 led me to only hitting 5% on the Hades EX training dummy to killing it with a few seconds to spare. It also led to me seeing my DPS be about 13k while progging Hades EX consistently. The question is, how much of a difference do secondary stats like crit and direct hit have? Thanks for what you do and keep up the good work. Good luck with the EOA prog. So this is actually quite a loaded question. You may not realize it. So stats don't work directly in that you get a one-to-one return for stats. Stats like critical and direct hit, skill speed, all of them have what we call breakpoints, where essentially you hit a specific number, you gain a certain amount of a stat, and you gain a flat percentage increase to your stats, overall. So I don't know what the number for crit and direct hit is off the top of my head, and I don't know many of the tiers for this one. I've kind of stopped keeping track of them as expansions have gone on. But I think in a previous expansion, let's use skill speed as an example. I think like 74 or something like that was basically 0.1 off of the global cooldown. That might even be what it is now. I don't even know. But if you had any less, if you had 1 to 73 skill speed from the previous tier, it did nothing. But when you hit that 74 skill speed, you'd see the difference actually reflected in your global cooldown reducing for weapon skills. So all stats work like that. Now when it comes to crit and direct hit, it's no different. When people just straight up recommend crit and direct hit, it's the easy answer, but realistically there's tiers of crit and direct hit that you want to consider and how much those have a direct impact on your actual DPS overall. Now, you're talking about your crit going from 2400 to 2900 and actually being able to kill the Hades EX training dummy. Now, you didn't mention exactly what your item level differences were between this. You could have lost it. You could have, for example, traded a 460 tombstone accessory for a 450 pentamelded accessory, and I couldn't have known that that is the difference you're comparing to. So being able to directly dissect this statement doesn't work. Also, when it comes to high crit, high direct hit builds, while they are the normal, your goal is to increase your item level while increasing your most desired substats, not to necessarily sacrifice one for the other. Now, there are cases where that isn't always going to be the way it works out. For example, for ranged physical DPS, what's actually recommended right now is a 470 tombstone ring and a 460 unupgraded tombstone ring as opposed to the Omega ring. Now, if you're looking for the vitality for something like Ultimate, obviously that's going to be a bit of a different case. But specifically for raw output, which seems to be the point of the question here, that is what is considered the optimal choice, even if by a small percentage because of the substats it actually provides. So it is a constant balancing game, and it is never going to be a solid answer one or the other. It's never always going to be item level. It's just most likely to be item level because it's few and far between that we have these situations, especially nowadays with the way that crafted gear has actually evolved since then. So again, it's a very loaded question with a very loaded answer. I would highly recommend you go and check out the Discord called The Balance. That is the name of the Discord. They talk about all this stuff in a far more detailed and important, that's not the right word, and knowledgeable way. Let's go with that. There was another word I was looking for, but it just slipped out of my mind as soon as I got it wrong. All right, next one, hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Howdy to the Happy Raider. Hello. I do happen to have a question about jobs. Knowing how many jobs we have now and how it's starting to become more of a life change to be an Omni player, do you feel that Square should keep adding jobs or try to start keeping what we have and make them more interesting so it doesn't feel like they would miss a job when doing updates to it? Also, hope you're doing well with your ultimate / beat it already. Best wishes from 11/11/2019. 11, my lucky number. Alexander, not my lucky fight. So as for the question, I feel that while in theory, what you've asked makes a lot of sense, I don't think it'll ever come down to that. I do think there's a point where we only get one expansion one job per expansion, and I'm betting 6.0 could be that time. I have a feeling that eventually keeping up the development for so many different jobs is going to create a problem unless they start using the same types of weapons for multiple new jobs, which with the way that the game is developed so far, it doesn't seem like that's likely because it's probably not coded to be something that's like very possible outside of a few select items for like Arcanist. And I also just think that they'd maybe think it's too boring, because every expansion they want to sell some hype new thing. It either needs to be a new race, new job, something. But if they hit a limit on races where they're like, it's going to be tough, they're going to eventually hit the same problem on jobs, where it's too much for them to keep up with developing unique armor sets, unique weapons. And again, I've mentioned this earlier in this video, I think we're starting to see the effects of that. So I don't think there will ever be a point where they release no jobs in expansion. I do think there's a point where they only release one job per expansion. And honestly, I wouldn't even be surprised if limited jobs are partially a reason why they're doing this, because they don't have to make weapons for that. They make one armor set, a few weapons, and everything else is stuff that's already in the game. I wouldn't be surprised if that is one of the alternative goals of limited jobs that they are not like telling us about, but that's conjecture. That's nothing based in fact, so consider that a crazy theory. I don't know how many questions are left, but this video is starting to get on the longer side. I don't know. I remember I split the recording in two, so I don't actually know how long the first one was. We'll do a few more. I think I'm actually almost done with all of them, so we'll see where we are. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, apps. Couple of short questions about ranged physical. What's the best way to do dungeon runs on Bard? Should I just dot one target for repertoire, then quick knock, or dot two and more? So generally, you want to have dots running on two targets. That is something you should be in a very good habit for, because especially in the current ultimate encounter, that is a very essential tool for the success of Bard DPS. So it also is enough GCDs that you can pretty reasonably Iron Jaws both targets to keep the dots up if it's going to be alive for a long period of time. After you've got those dots on two targets, generally your go-to AoE is going to be Mage's Ballad. That's a song where if you really want to burst out an AoE pack, that's the one to have, because not only are you going to be getting double the chance of the resets, because you have two different monsters giving you procs from your dots onto your Rain of Death resets, but you'll also be generating them from Quick Knock occasionally. You'll have so many Rain of Death resets, you probably won't even know what to do with them. But I think that's your best bet. Once that's done, you go through your normal one, you go through Payon next, which actually Payon in AoE situations feels pretty good. Once you're at 4 repertoire stacks and you have that max haste buff, and you're pumping out Quick Knocks, it actually feels pretty good. And then, once those are both gone, then Minuets, not really much to say. You won't have the haste buff the whole time. You'll just be getting in a little bit of extra single target damage, but it adds up. It's certainly better than not adding any potency to all your AoEs, but that should be the raw basics of what you need to do for dungeon runs on AoE. By the way, throw Nature's Min on your tank. Doesn't hurt, and especially if there's like enemies with debuffs on, like vulnerability ups or dots or something they can apply to the tank, throw a Wondrous Pain on them. Throw it on early so it can actually block the status effect altogether. That's something bards can do that they don't do very often, and it is a great asset to dungeon runs that is wildly underutilized. As for the second one, what's your opinion on Dancer being an RNG class? Sometimes getting no procs for a long time feels bad and slow, but lots of procs feels good and fast. I don't know, part of me wishes there was more consistency. I find that the job's consistent enough. I think the Flourish procs that you're guaranteed every minute are enough consistency, and I feel like it averages out because everything's at 50-50. It's basically like flipping a coin. Like, how many times can you flip a coin? Besides, I'm kind of hardened to that because the first job you mentioned, Bard, while yes, you do have Imperial Arrow, it is still a very RNG-based class. I've gone through entire Wanderer's Minuet only getting a full 3-stack Pitch Perfect, which sucks for your burst window. I've gone through entire songs without ever seeing a Refulgent Arrow when it should be a highly likely thing to happen, I've barely gotten any Bloodletter procs before. I remember years ago getting no Bloodletter procs for literally like 20-30 seconds before we had the songs the way they are now. So that's just true of anything that has procs. Sometimes there's going to be outliers that feel bad. There's going to be parts that feel amazing at the same time. And the highs come with the lows, And that's part of the feel of the job. All right, next question. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Haps, how you doing? Hey, you asked me a question with an exclamation mark, and I like it. I'm doing all right. So I had this question since listening to you guys discuss DPS balance on Stay the Realm. I was always under the impression that the jobs without raid utility should put out more personal DPS, and the jobs with raid utility should have lower personal, but then when you add their raid contribution, they should be slightly above the non-utility DPS jobs and our DPS totals. It seems the community is under the opinion that the jobs without raid utilities should be doing more in personal DPS and our DPS, which, mind you, their personal DPS is effectively their R DPS. You know what I mean? Well, actually, their R DPS is lower than their personal DPS because they're all benefiting from other people's R DPS, thus lowering their P DPS to match numbers that are closer to everyone else's. So just wanted to label that. If that's the case, why even take a raid utility job if there's going to be beat out in R DPS, since R DPS adds all the DPS they gave to the party to their total, yet there's something outdone by the jobs that get all the utility subtracted from their total R DPS. So I got a bit of clarity on what that is the case. So first of all, you're defining utility entirely in that of how it affects our DPS. Now, I will admit that is something that our community does quite frequently and can be quite frustrating because there can be other elements of a job that are determining what kind of utility they actually bring. Mantras, Nature's Min, Troubadours, Shield Sambas, Curing Waltzes. I know that some of those things seem kind of tiny and you kind of go, I don't know if I'd really consider that, but it's been a constant discussion for years. One of the biggest reasons why they said they were, they didn't want to give Black Mage a raise is because they'd have to nerf its DPS. That's been kind of thrown out the window now because Summoner has a raise and its RDPS is out the fucking roof. And then Red Mage has a raise also, and just because it can do more of them, it's even lower. It's really, this whole res tax thing has been really, really weird to deal with. But then you have jobs like Machinist who don't have any, they don't attribute anything to RDPS, but they have one utility that reduces damage taken, but they're way lower than a lot of other jobs. So you see, there's just all these other, it's just a lot of conflicting ideas and actual results that make it so that it's easy to have an opinion on any side and feel like it's somewhat justified. You know, like your opinion is no less justified than the opinion that we had on State of the Realm regarding the DPS balance that we talked about from that episode. So a lot of this comes down to what is actually defined as valuable in terms of what something is bringing to a raid. And defining that value is something that is different player for player. And it's never going to be something that we all agree on. I am of the personal opinion, if you offer nothing else to your raid team, your personal DPS in the best case scenario should always be higher than every other person's that they are contributing, assuming they are contributing things other than specifically our DPS. Things like res taxes, things like damage reduction, things like addles and feints and all that kind of stuff. Like even, I mean, I guess it's hard to judge those. That's something you kind of have to judge per role, addles and feints, because that's something the whole role can do. That's not a specific job feature, so it's hard to kind of punish someone for it. But I mean, you kind of get the point. You understand where I'm going with this. Like, do you value, like, would there be a tax on Summoner's DPS because they have a Medica 2 during Phoenix? Are you going to tax Dancer because of Curing Waltz? Like, it starts to come into question what is worth taxing DPS for and what isn't. Mobility? It's a bit of a question mark. Melee uptime seems like a reasonable thing for reason for melee to be generally placed higher on the RDPS than roles like ranged physical, who can you do their attacks from any range for the most part. So yeah, again, this is, I don't know, this is another question I don't really have a solid answer for. It's more like just breaking down why these types of opinions and like why the varied opinions kind of exist in the first place. I had a place I was going to go with that kind of leading off the last point that I made, but I think that's a reasonable enough answer. If I remember, I'll include it in a future Mondays episode, but I had another point I was about to segue off onto, and I kind of lost it in my own speech. So hopefully that was adequate enough, because I know it was a mouthful. All right, next one, hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hey, Haps, how you doing? I'm definitely going to need a sip of coffee. I don't know what's going on with this coughing fit, because I had plenty of water today. Maybe it's just from talking too much. Oh, that's good. That's some good stuff right there. So, I've got a question about the state of the Expert Roulette. In Stormblood, when they changed the schedule at which new Expert dungeons were added, I understood the rationale of every other patch having only one new dungeon to release new content more consistently, even though it really ticked me off on those patches when eventually we'd almost never get the actually current dungeon for the Roulette. For 5.0 Roulette, in the group I play with, we got disinterested in keeping up with Experts more rapidly than usual because they didn't even have gear sets to collect. Well, specifically, the 0.1 dungeon has a gear set to collect. I'm trying to remember... Going back to Temple of the Fist and those, I don't remember Temple of the Fists having a different gear set than Kurenai Castle. It was all the same gear, as far as I can remember, until 0.1 when Scala came out, and that was a very coveted set. And Grand Cosmos has its own set as well, although it does very much remind me of the Woad set from, the Tank Woad set in particular, like a remix of that from Samal. That's where it was from, I'm pretty sure. So now with Grand Cosmos dumped in the other three, what's your take on this? Have you been feeling expert fatigue? I've never done expert in years, but it has nothing to do with the dungeons. I actually have really liked a lot of the expert dungeons and a lot of the dungeons they've been releasing for years now. But it has, expert fatigue for me has nothing to do with the way they've done expert. I can get tomestones doing a million other things. I can desynth items from a ton of other places. I have no reason to do it because I don't need anything from them. It has nothing to do with how often they've released or scheduled or the glamour available, because none of that matters to me. All that matters to me is my tomestones get capped every week, or, I desynth some items, and I don't need to do expert for that, so it's just not been of interest to me. Sometimes I like hopping in and I get to listen to that boss music, which I love this expansion. I was a big fan of the Stormblood final boss music in dungeons as well. It's always nice to hop back into the twinning and get to run through that dungeon, and Grand Cosmos has been pretty fun when I actually do get to do it, but I don't have much of reason to, so I don't. And I don't really see much of reason to change the way it is. Dungeons, are you just experiencing what I experienced years ago? You're experiencing it now, and you'll probably continue to experience it, and it'll be good. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. I don't think we need to change anything with experts or expert roulettes or any of that. It's just dungeons are being added because dungeons need to be added because it's a base level of content that they want in the game, and I don't see that changing, and I don't see a reason to change it. So that's my opinion on it. All right, and that looks like that's the last question I'm going to take. One of them was like, why aren't there a lot of healers? And I don't really have much of an answer to that. Not anything different than I've said in the past however long. One of them was about SteelSeries products, about like why they don't do one. And I'm like, I don't know. That's not really my forte. As someone who is sponsored by SteelSeries, I don't really have much of a... like an input line, like a say, like make this again. That's not how it works. So I don't really have much to add to that question. And I think there was something else in here that I didn't answer, but I don't remember what it was. So that's going to be a wrap for this episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. Thank you for watching. And if you have a question for Mondays with Mr. Happy, please ask it in the comment section of the video below. Now, I will be recording next one from New Jersey. I will be doing next week's episode, even though it's the Thanksgiving weekend. I'll just be recording it from 3,000 miles away because I'll be visiting my family in New Jersey. I got my 10-year high school reunion as well, which will be fun, maybe. I don't know. We'll find out. So, yeah. So that's my plans for next week. And be on the lookout for the range versus. I'm going to be getting to that after this. I'm going to be pretty much busy for the next 4 or 5 hours working on that. That's the Patreon videos I mentioned before. And I want to get working on some new stuff as well. But anyway, that's going to be a wrap for me. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. And I will see you in the next week's episode. Until then, take care.